The answer is yes, ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required in the shed. This is based on the National Electrical Code, specifically NEC 2020, Article 210.85. The reasoning behind this requirement is that the shed, regardless of its specific use or its setting, is still considered a dwelling unit according to the NEC definition. The NEC defines a dwelling unit as one or more rooms intended for living purposes in one or more buildings or portions of a building. The NEC mandates ground fault circuit interrupter protection for all 125-volt, 15-amp and 20-amp receptacles located in specific areas of dwelling units. These areas include firstly, bathrooms, secondly, kitchens, thirdly, garages and accessory buildings of less than 1,000 square feet, fourthly, outdoor receptacles, fifthly, crawl spaces, and sixthly, unfinished basements. Given that the shed in question is an accessory building and is less than 1,000 square feet, ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required on all of its outlets. Therefore, the inspector's requirement for ground fault circuit interrupter protection is correct and it must be installed according to the code. To elaborate further on ground fault circuit interrupter protection, it's essential to understand its function and the circumstances under which it is required by the National Electrical Code. A ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, is a safety device designed to protect individuals from electrical shock. It works by monitoring the current flowing into and out of a circuit. If there is an imbalance, indicating that current is leaking to ground, which could happen if someone touches a live wire or a faulty appliance, the GFCI quickly trips the circuit, cutting off the power and preventing a potentially fatal electrical shock. The National Electrical Code outlines specific locations where ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required to enhance safety. These requirements are based on the increased risk of electrical shock in certain environments, particularly those where water or moisture are present. As previously stated, the NEC requires ground fault circuit interrupter protection for 125-volt, 15-amp, and 20-amp receptacles in dwelling units in the following locations. Firstly, bathrooms, due to the proximity of water sources. Secondly, kitchens, especially near sinks and countertops where appliances are commonly used. Thirdly, garages and accessory buildings of less than 1,000 square feet because these areas often have concrete floors and may be damp or wet. Fourthly, outdoor receptacles to protect against exposure to weather and wet conditions. Fifthly, crawl spaces, where moisture can accumulate. And sixthly, unfinished basements, which are also prone to dampness. In the specific case of the shed, the requirement for ground fault circuit interrupter protection stems from its classification as an accessory building of less than 1,000 square feet. Even if the shed is used for storage or maintenance purposes, the NEC considers it the location where electrical hazards may be present and therefore mandates ground fault circuit interrupter protection for all 125-volt, 15-amp and 20-amp receptacles. It's important to note that the definition of a dwelling unit under the NEC includes not only residential buildings but also any building or portion of a building intended for living purposes. This broad definition ensures that all areas where people may be present are covered by the safety requirements of the code. The requirement for ground fault circuit interrupter protection in sheds is not dependent on the shed's specific use or setting. Regardless of whether the shed is used for storage, maintenance, or any other purpose, the NEC mandates ground fault circuit interrupter protection to protect personnel from electrical shock. Therefore, it's crucial to comply with the inspector's requirement and install ground fault circuit interrupter protection on all 125-volt, 15-amp and 20-amp receptacles in the shed. Failing to do so could result in code violations and potential safety hazards. When installing ground fault circuit interrupter protection, it's essential to follow the manufacturer's instructions and the requirements of the National Electrical Code. Ground fault circuit interrupter receptacles should be installed in place of standard receptacles, and they should be properly wired according to the code. Additionally, it's important to test the ground fault circuit interrupter receptacles regularly to ensure that they are functioning correctly. This can be done by pressing the test button on the receptacle and verifying that it trips the circuit. If the ground fault circuit interrupter receptacle does not trip when the test button is pressed, it should be replaced immediately. In summary, ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required for all 125 volt, 15 amp and 20 amp receptacles in the shed, based on the requirements of the National Electrical Code. This requirement is intended to protect personnel from electrical shock and ensure electrical safety. Compliance with the code is essential to avoid violations and maintain a safe environment. Let's delve deeper into the technical aspects of ground fault circuit interrupters, their operation, and their proper installation. A ground fault circuit interrupter, as mentioned earlier, is a crucial safety device designed to prevent electrical shock. It achieves this by continuously monitoring the balance of current flowing through the hot and neutral conductors of a circuit. In a properly functioning circuit, the current flowing into an appliance or device through the hot conductor should be exactly equal to the current returning through the neutral conductor. However, if a fault occurs, such as when a person comes into contact with a live wire, a portion of the current may flow to ground through the person's body. This creates an imbalance in the current flowing through the hot and neutral conductors. The ground fault circuit interrupter is designed to detect this imbalance, even if it's as small as 5 milliamps. When the ground fault circuit interrupter detects an imbalance, it quickly trips the circuit, cutting off the power and preventing a potentially fatal electrical shock. The tripping time is typically very short, usually within a fraction of a second, which is fast enough to prevent serious injury. Ground fault circuit interrupters are available in several different forms. Firstly, receptacle-type ground fault circuit interrupters are designed to replace standard electrical receptacles. These are commonly used in bathrooms, kitchens, and other areas where ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required. Secondly, circuit breaker-type ground fault circuit interrupters are installed in the electrical panel and provide ground fault circuit interrupter protection for an entire circuit. These are often used for outdoor circuits or for circuits that serve multiple locations. Thirdly, portable ground fault circuit interrupters are designed to be plugged into standard electrical receptacles and provide ground fault circuit interrupter protection for any device plugged into the portable ground fault circuit interrupter. These are useful for temporary applications or for areas where permanent ground fault circuit interrupter protection is not available. When installing ground fault circuit interrupters, it's crucial to follow the manufacturer's instructions and the requirements of the National Electrical Code. Firstly, ensure that the power to the circuit is turned off before beginning any work. Secondly, identify the hot, neutral, and ground wires. Thirdly, connect the wires to the ground fault circuit interrupter receptacle or circuit breaker according to the manufacturer's instructions. Fourthly, test the ground fault circuit interrupter receptacle or circuit breaker to ensure that it is functioning correctly. This can be done by pressing the test button and verifying that it trips the circuit. Fifthly, if the ground fault circuit interrupter receptacle or circuit breaker does not trip when the test button is pressed, it should be replaced immediately. In addition to the installation requirements, there are also specific maintenance requirements for ground fault circuit interrupters. Firstly, ground fault circuit interrupters should be tested monthly to ensure that they are functioning correctly. This can be done by pressing the test button and verifying that it trips the circuit. Secondly, ground fault circuit interrupters should be replaced if they fail to trip when the test button is pressed or if they show any signs of damage. Thirdly, ground fault circuit interrupters should be protected from moisture and physical damage. In the context of the shed, it's important to consider the specific electrical needs of the shed and to install ground fault circuit interrupter protection accordingly. If the shed is used for storage, ground fault circuit interrupter protection may be required only for receptacles used for lighting or for powering small appliances. However, if the shed is used for maintenance or other activities that involve the use of power tools or other equipment, ground fault circuit interrupter protection may be required for all receptacles in the shed. It's also important to consider the location of the shed and its proximity to water sources. If the shed is located near a water source, such as a sprinkler system or a garden hose, ground fault circuit interrupter protection may be required for all receptacles in the shed, regardless of their use. In summary, ground fault circuit interrupters are essential safety devices that protect individuals from electrical shock. They work by monitoring the balance of current flowing through the hot and neutral conductors of a circuit and quickly tripping the circuit if an imbalance is detected. Ground fault circuit interrupters are required in specific locations, including bathrooms, kitchens, garages, outdoor receptacles, crawl spaces, and unfinished basements, as well as accessory buildings of less than 1,000 square feet. Proper installation and maintenance of ground fault circuit interrupters are crucial to ensure their effectiveness. To further clarify the requirements for ground fault circuit interrupter protection in accessory buildings, let's examine the specific language of the National Electrical Code. As previously stated, NEC 210.85 requires ground fault circuit interrupter protection for all 125 volt, 15 amp and 20 amp receptacles in garages and accessory buildings of dwelling units. The term accessory building is defined in the NEC as a building or structure, the use of which is incidental to that of the dwelling unit and which is located in the same lot. This definition is broad enough to include a variety of structures such as sheds, detached garages, workshops, and storage buildings. The key factor in determining whether ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required is whether the accessory building is located on the same lot as a dwelling unit and whether its use is incidental to that of the dwelling unit. If both of these conditions are met, then ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required for all 125 volt, 15 amp and 20 amp receptacles in the accessory building. The size limitation of 1,000 square feet is also an important factor to consider. If the accessory building is larger than 1,000 square feet, then ground fault circuit interrupter protection is not required for all receptacles in the building. However, ground fault circuit interrupter protection may still be required for receptacles located in specific areas of the building, such as bathrooms, kitchens, or outdoor locations. It's also important to note that the NEC does not distinguish between residential and commercial properties when it comes to ground fault circuit interrupter protection in accessory buildings. The requirements for ground fault circuit interrupter protection are the same regardless of whether the property is residential or commercial. Therefore, even if the apartment complex is considered a commercial property, the shed is still subject to the ground fault circuit interrupter protection requirements of the NEC. In this specific case of the shed in the apartment complex, the shed is located in the same lot as the apartment complex, which is considered a dwelling unit. The shed is used for storage and maintenance purposes, which is incidental to the use of the apartment complex. The shed is also less than 1,000 square feet. Therefore, all of the conditions for requiring ground fault circuit interrupter protection are met, and ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required for all 125 volt, 15 amp and 20 amp receptacles in the shed. To further emphasize the importance of ground fault circuit interrupter protection, consider the potential consequences of not installing ground fault circuit interrupters in areas where they are required. Electrical shock can cause a variety of injuries, ranging from minor burns to cardiac arrest and death. Ground fault circuit interrupters are designed to prevent these injuries by quickly cutting off the power to a circuit when a ground fault is detected. By installing ground fault circuit interrupters in areas where they are required, you can significantly reduce the risk of electrical shock and protect yourself and others from potential harm. In addition to the safety benefits, there are also legal and financial consequences of not complying with the requirements of the National Electrical Code. Failure to install ground fault circuit interrupters where they are required can result in code violations, fines, and even legal action. It's important to consult with a qualified electrical contractor to ensure that your electrical system is in compliance with all applicable codes and regulations. In summary, ground fault circuit interrupter protection is a critical safety measure that is required in specific locations by the National Electrical Code. Accessory buildings of less than 1,000 square feet are among the locations where ground fault circuit interrupter protection is required for all 125 volt, 15 amp and 20 amp receptacles. Compliance with these requirements is essential to protect individuals from electrical shock and to avoid legal and financial consequences. Remember to always consult with a qualified electrical contractor for any electrical work to ensure safety and compliance with the National Electrical Code.